Saturday night blues. Well, we'll be back at 1 o'clock. We fine with that? It's great. Good. No, we can ask them. Yeah, we asked them. We have to. No, what's that? I was fighting on the plane. Fighting because of actions. Don't get obnoxious. Just sit down. Don't let me change subject.
Thank you, Rabbi Wein. The Shiur will now begin. Thank you. That's good. It's 10 o'clock, yes. It is, yes. It's start. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're starting.
Yes, yes, I did. Thank you. Please don't forget, it's very important.
How you doing, Yuda? Really good. Thank you. Okay, Tov. Good day to everyone. Good Erev Shabbat. So, as we progress through Chumash Breshit, so Lech Lecha and Vayera, where to a great extent the Parshas of Avraham Avinu, Chayesara and Toldot are regarding Yitzchak, and Vayetze and Vayishlach are regarding Yaakov Avinu. The last four Parshas of Breshit, from Vayeshev, Miketz, Vayigash, Vayichi, are really regarding Yosef and his brothers. Now, we all know the Mishnah in Avot, Asor Nisyonos Nisnasa Avram Avinu V'omad Bekulo. Our father Avram was tested 10 times. That a word nisayon in Hebrew is an experiment, a test. It's a situation that comes upon a human being, and we don't know at the beginning what the result will be. The person, so to speak, has to make a choice. It is something that he has to take into consideration. So the Mishnah says that there were 10 events in the life of Avram Avinu that were a great test, a test of his faith. How would he respond? And the Mishnah testifies, V'yomad b'kulon. He, so to speak, passed the test every time. If we look at the life of our father Yaakov, So we can wonder why the Mishnah did not say, as it did by Avraham Avinu, that Yaakov Avinu had so many tests, v'yomad b'kulam, and he was able to overcome them all. In this week's Parsha alone, we read the meeting with Esav, wrestling with the angel, the story of Dinah. All of these tests. And then we have to remember the 20 years in the house of Lavan, the fact that he had to flee to escape Lavan, and he had to flee to escape Esav originally. Are those not nisyonos? Are those not as great a challenge as those that faced Avraham Avinu? And yet we find that neither the Torah itself nor the commentators deal with these events, so to speak, as being nisyonos. They describe them for us. They explain them. We learn moral lessons from them. But it's not on the par with the tests of Avraham Avinu. So I always wonder, why not? Why don't we have a Mishnah that says, you know, Asor Nisyonos Nisnasa Yaakov Avinu V'Amad B'Kulam. We can easily fabricate 10 tests from the story of Yaakov as told to us in the parshas of the Torah that we have just read in this week's parsha. And then you're going to have the test of being separated from Yosef for 20 years and not knowing what happened to him. That's a terrible test, because then there's never any closure. You never come to a decision. The Gemara says, Zeirahi shemeis nishtachach min alev. It's a decree of heaven. It's human nature that no matter how beloved the person was to us, if the person passes away, eventually we're able to deal with it. It's not something that haunts us every minute, everywhere we go. But the Medrash says that by Yaakov Avinu, since he didn't know what happened to Yosef, so he never was freed from that tension, from the angst. Yosef Enenu. So therefore, this basic question exists. Did the tests of Yaakov Avinu differ in degree and kind from the tests of Avraham Avinu? So that by Avraham Avinu, the Mishnah could say, Asor Nisyonos Nisnasa Avraham Avinu V'Amad B'Kulam, and by Yaakov it ignores it. By Yaakov Avinu, it does not say that he was tested so many times and he rose from it. So obviously, if we analyze the matter, there must be two different kinds of tests. Not all tests are equal. We simply know that from our experience in school. Teacher says, we're going to do a quiz. Okay, so I got a 70 on the quiz at Maharaj. But if this is going to be the final exam, it's going to be the Bagrut, it's going to be the psychometric. So that's a different kind of test. That's a test that can and usually does influence my future. It's okay, isn't it?
It's okay. I just want to make sure it's still mute. Okay, you're okay.
Yeah. So what's the degree of test that we're talking about here? That is very important for us to deal with. That all of the tests of Avraham Avinu were tests that were imposed upon him by heaven. He did not, so to speak, go looking for those tests. He did not contribute to the situation that brought them about. Other external factors created the test. Nimrod, it's the one that gives him the test of Ur-Kasdi. The war with the kings gives him the test of the war. There's no war, he's not doing anything. The revelation of God to him regarding Sdom, so that evokes the response regarding Sdom. The Lord tells him to sacrifice his son. So that he hears the Rebbeinu Shalom tell it. Avimelech comes to make trouble for him. Sorrow passes away, he has to buy a grave. So none of those are self-induced, so to speak. They're not tests that he is the catalyst for them. That his behavior is such that he brought them about. They are what we could call reactions to circumstances not of his making and not necessarily of his wanting. That's one type of nisoyon. That's the type of nisoyon that people say, well, why did this thing happen to me? What did I do? There's no contributory negligence, so to speak, on my part. There's an entire book of the Kisvei HaKodesh called the Sefer Eov, where Eov is tested terribly, but he didn't do anything to bring about the test. The book says that the Sultan in heaven, proposed the idea and then it happened. But it's not a test of Eov himself. It was imposed upon him. There's no modicum of behavior that brought it about. So apparently, in life, there are tests that have no explanation. that they have no basis in the behavior of those who are being tested. That's what Chazal meant, the Gzeira Milfonai. It's a decree, it has to be. It tells the angels there's no use asking questions, why? The tests of Yaakov Avinu are all of a different nature. They are all tests that he brought upon himself. His behavior, his choice remains the catalyst for what happens here. He could have given Esav, the lentil soup and said, here, my brother, eat, and, goodbye. But he is the one that says, I want you to sell me the Bechorah. Is there any wonder later that Esav would somehow feel at least cheated by the event? Are they of equal value? Bowl of soup and the firstborn rights? So that was Yaakov's choice. That is an Nisayon that he created. He's not doing it on the basis of heaven, of a Tzivui Hashem. The Lord did not appear to him and say, give him soup and take the Bechorah. It's human choice. That's a different kind of Nisayon. It's a self-imposed Nisayon. So therefore, it doesn't rank as the Nisyonos of Avraham Avinu, which always came from the outside and from heaven and from events he could not control. So his mother tells him to disguise himself in order to obtain the brachot. And that's a test. He could have told her no. We see that he's fearful. He says, my father will catch on. And so they go through an elaborate scheme and put goat hair on his arms. And no matter how we interpret the story of Yitzchak and what Yaakov says to him, Esav certainly feels cheated. Achi Korah Shmo Yaakov. You know why he's called Yaakov? Vayakveini zeh pamoyim. He's cheated me twice. As Bechorosi lokach. First, he took advantage of me to take away the Bechorah. And now, as Birchosi, he takes my blessing away. He dresses up like me, he pretends he's me. So Yaakov brought this on himself. Now we will justify Yaakov. He had to do it. It's the destiny of the Jewish people, etc., etc. But the facts are what the Torah tells us they are. So this is an Nisayon that he brought upon himself. This week's Parsha says, Vayishlach malachim al Esav achiv. He sends messengers to tell Esav he's coming back. Rashi quotes the Medrash, the famous concepts, sleeping dogs, don't wake them.
Let's sleeping dogs like.
All right, well, what are you starting up? What do you tell the messages? I'm coming back and I got Yeshli Shor v'Chamor. He's bragging how well he's done. You want to come back, slip back in the middle of the night and leave it. So again, it's a self-imposed nisoyam. It's a nisoyam that he brought upon himself. The story of his wrestling with the angel. Rashi again quoting the Gemara, he went back for Pachim Ktanim, he went back to take the little things that he forgot. What's the difference, you know? So the Gemara says, because tzaddikim, their wealth is kosher, so therefore they treasure it for the fact that it's honest. So that's why he went back to take back the small things, because they were a symbol of his honesty. But he didn't have to go back. Nobody told him to go back. If he wouldn't have gone back, he never would have had to wrestle with the angel. He wouldn't have been crippled. It all could have been avoided. So again, it's self-imposed. He brings it upon himself. That's not the Nisoyan of Avraham Avinu. And then we will have Vateitzei Dino. So you should have told your daughter where you're going. It's not a good neighborhood. You don't go out alone. The story happens. And then there's wars and Shimon and Levi and the whole thing. All could have been avoided. She says that he was afraid that he would have to do a bad shidduch for her. And it seems in the Medrash that there is a whiff of criticism. That maybe had he allowed the shidduch to take place, things would have turned out better for everyone concerned. So those are choices that he made. He's the one that gives Yosef the Ksonas Pasim. He's the one that gives Yosef his coat of many colors. So he's the one that starts it up. And when Yosef complains about the brothers, so even though Yaakov reprimands him, it says, V'yoviv shomar sadavor. Yaakov accepts what he said. He says, you know, he has a right to dream. The dreams are going to come true. And the dreams are going to be the catalyst for the fact the brothers will sell it. Here comes the dreamer. So throughout his life, Yaakov Avinu is the one that is the cause for the nisyonos that come upon him. That's a different type of Messiah. And therefore, Chazal don't reckon that it is on the same level or plane as the Nisyonos of Avraham Avinu. And we'll see that Yaakov himself agrees with that. Paro asks him, how old are you? So he says how old he is. And then he says, I'm not like my fathers and grandfather, they lived longer. And not only that, my years are few and they're not good years. What kind of an answer is that? First of all, when somebody asks you, how are you? He's not interested to find out how you are. So there are therefore stock answers. Baruch Hashem, thank God, good to see you. But if you ask somebody, how are you? And he tells you, you got more than you have bargained for. And here, Yaakov unloads on Paro. So the Meforshim explain that he's really unloading on himself. He's not complaining to heaven. He's not saying they gave me a bad break. He's saying everything that happened is because of me. I brought it on myself. Those are my choices. And a person is always obligated to live with his or her choices. And to a great extent, that's why the word nisoyon also means an experiment, because you don't know how the experiment's going to turn out. When you make the choice, you think that it's a wise choice or a profitable choice, or it's the right choice, but you don't know. But when the choice and the solution to the choice is imposed upon you by heaven, that's a different matter completely. Well, that's a question of obedience, it's a question of faith, question of determination that the person had. And therefore one can live with the consequences very easily. People always say, you know, I could have bought Rechavia 30 years ago. That's a choice that you had 30 years ago. Why didn't you buy it? But if a law is passed that you can never buy a neighborhood, or you can never buy a building, so then you don't feel so badly, because what could you do? People lived in the Soviet Union don't regret that they didn't invest in the stock market in the 1930s, because there was no stock market and they couldn't invest. But if you're in a situation where you could invest and you didn't, so you have to live with that choice. And that's why people are always full of self-recrimination, even self-doubt, because the experiment didn't turn out the way they thought it was going to turn out. And it's that way in 100 different ways in life. So the Torah wanted to make that clear to us. So there are things that are gzeira. One of the debates that exists in the Jewish world, it's not as vehement now because it's after 80 years, But one of the debates is whether the Holocaust, the Jews could have gotten out of it, could have left. And the other opinion is that it was a gzeira. I heard that debate from two great gedolim here in Israel. One said that the punishment was that we had a chance to go to Eretz Israel and we didn't. And the other said, Chas v'sholem, it was a gzeira. It was a decree from heaven. We had no choice. And therefore, that colors your entire attitude towards a lot of things. Which side of the debate that you're going to be on? So one has a recognition that the nisyonos are self-imposed and self-created, like Yaakov Avinu. So the Mishnah doesn't stop to notice it because that's life. That's everyday life. If we have hundreds of decisions in our lives, if not more, that's we brought it on ourselves for good or for better. But when Chazal spoke about their type of nisyonos, about Avram Avinu, those are nisyonos that occur from the outside, that are imposed by heaven and circumstances and others. That's a different type of nisyon completely. And therefore has to be judged differently as well. I think that that's a good and practical message for all of us when we look at things personally and nationally and try to identify what type of nisoyon is involved and therefore what our reaction to it should be. Well, Shabbat Shalom, everyone, and thank you for coming, and Kol Tuv Selah.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. I'm okay. Thank you.
You're okay?
Yeah. Shabbat Shalom.
שלום, כוח גדול. גם בר כוכבא זה אותו דיון של אחרת. האם עדיין יש דיון בין חכמים?
בוודאי.
זה בעצם די דומה.
זה אוקיי.
אלה שמאשימים את רבי עקיבא בחורבן הכל. יותר משהו במרד. אני שואל אבל לא היום, אבל בהיסטוריה של היהודים. יש רבנים שאמרו את זה גם 1,000 שנה, או זה רק דבר מודרני שאומרים אותו בגלל הציונות? רק שנה,